Everybody, good morning everybody. I'm hoping that this will work. I'm so terribly sorry. We've had some interesting glitches this morning. My browser just decided that it didn't like um, uh, uh, the capacity to go on Facebook Live from this morning. So I've just had to download another browser, and this is my third attempt. So I'm glad to see that we're live. So good morning to everybody to this Monday, the 11th of May. Delightful to see you. Good morning, Mish. I'm glad that we've got people who've hung about and been patient. Thank you so much. My name's Bron Pearson. I'm from Pinnacle People Solutions, and for those of you who don't know me or haven't joined us before, and welcome to our daily Facebook live stream. So Pinnacle People Solutions provides human resource services, advice, support, etc. 24/7 to regionally based small to medium sized businesses and not-for-profit organisations. We are here to help you and your business through what are incredibly challenging times during this COVID period. So we have been, this is our 9th week of being live up on Facebook, ideally at 9:15, although this morning a bit later than normal. My apologies. Every weekday with updates on new information as it's coming through and it impacts employers and their employees, as well as more detailed information about topics related to staffing and business management that you as our viewers and audience have told us that you would like to know more about. So please ask any questions that you might have as we go along, and I will do my best to answer those. If I can't answer them straight away, I'll take them on notice to answer them the following day. Outside of this, you can contact myself or my fantastic team anytime via Facebook, email or telephone, and the details are in the comments. So I did do a special Facebook live stream on Saturday this past weekend, because we did have some fairly significant announcements made following the National Cabinet meeting last Friday. So just going to go through the substance of those briefly, but most of all we want to focus today on, and thank you team, I noticed they've just put up our contact details in the chat screen there for you. But mostly I want to talk about the topic of today's presentation being what the heck do we do now? It's one thing to have this 3-step roadmap that the Prime Minister has outlined. We've now got more information about what each state is doing about that, although we're yet to hear from Victoria. I understand that'll be this morning. Daniel Andrews will be talking about what's happening there. We have, as of yesterday, 14 new cases of COVID. That brings it to nearly, 6,941 in Australia. The Chief Medical Officer has reminded us that every individual can do more than the regulations that are in force at any particular point in time, and that's absolutely true. So in terms of all of us being mindful about hand hygiene, about social distancing, and not mingling if we don't need to. There's been arrests in Victoria for those protesting against the Victorian restrictions. We've got some students in New South Wales and Queensland returning to school from today, and so lots of interesting things have happened. So obviously we've had nearly 2 months in some form of coronavirus lockdown, of course, and on Friday both the Prime Minister and the Chief Health Officer outlined this 3-step roadmap to relaxing COVID-19 restrictions, and this is the first significant sort of relaxation and step process for doing that we've seen since the COVID crisis actually came into play. So the idea of this 3-step roadmap is that it's intended to be rolled out between now and July, but premiers and chief ministers are expected to begin adopting step 1 in the days ahead, and I'm going to talk through what's happening with each state, with particular emphasis on New South Wales. Obviously, we'll go through now these announcements about this three-step process, but having said that, the plans have to be legislated by each individual state and territory before they're effective. So, as we've already seen, some states will move faster than others in terms of legislating and putting these things in place. So, just to give you a quick overview, stage one, which in New South Wales will commence this Friday, some elements of stage one. So I'll be really clear about that. You'll be allowed to have up to 5 visitors in your home, and that's your household number plus 5 guests, and be in a group of 10 outdoors. That's you plus 9 people. There are some states that already have that level of gathering rule in place. But it will be extended to all jurisdictions still living under the 2-person restrictions, which we are in New South Wales presently. So one of the questions that we had for Saturday's broadcast was, does that mean you're allowed to go and kick the footy with 9 mates? And the answer to that, when the authorities actually answered that question, was yes. My son was very excited, I have to tell you. So if the interpretation of that is it's 10 people training in a football field, it's 10 people getting together in a park. Outdoor boot camps are also allowed to start back up, and playgrounds, public swimming pools, libraries, community centres and golf courses will be allowed to reopen. There is also another welcome announcement, and that is that seated venues that serve food, so cafes and restaurants, can reopen, but they'll only be able to have 10 customers maximum sitting at tables at any one time. If venues like bars, nightclubs, casinos that don't have any seated dining will not be allowed to reopen until step 3. And food service venues need to make sure that there is a space of 4 square metres per person. So those seated venues, cafes and restaurants have to have 4 metre square distance between per person. And each patron needs to exercise a social distancing of 1.5 metres. This 10-person rule also applies to retail businesses. Now, I have had some questions about if I've got a retail business or I have a business of any description that falls into this category, and I have different physical locations, but I'm the one business, can I have 10 people in each location? We're just getting clarification around that, or indeed if you share a physical space with another business, what does that mean in terms of the 10 people in attendance situation? Obviously, wherever that is, you're still going to, if you've got people seated at any point, you have to meet a 4 square metre rule. If you've got people in the space, it can't exceed 10 and they have to be 1.5 metres apart. So what about for workplaces, which is what we're here to discuss? And of course, cafes and restaurants and gyms and public spaces and places are all employers. So this affects everybody. So steps 1 and 2 of the plan are still intended for Australians to continue to work from home if it works for the person and their employer. So there's not expected to see a widespread return to workplaces until step 3. So that's not when a physical return to workplaces is going to be contemplated. So the Chief Medical Officer has also warned us about, and this has been something that has had to be really strictly monitored by employers, etc., over this COVID period so far, and we're being urged to drop the soldier on mindset when it comes to attending a workplace when you're sick. So we've seen that really get wound back, and businesses and employers get a lot more stringent about the attendance of sick people in the work environment. But this idea of trying to be a hero and coming to work with cough, cold, sore throat or any other kind of symptoms has got to be off the agenda for the foreseeable future. So I'm sure we've all been guilty of it at different times, but we're going to have to change that mentality, particularly considering the heightened health and safety risks and obligations that employers have over this time, and I'll get to that. So the intention of step 1 is that we will be allowed to travel recreationally for day trips of up to 150k. We're waiting to see that be rolled out in New South Wales. That hasn't happened yet. And it's only likely to be within your state and territory unless you're bordering on another region and you have a permit or otherwise permitted to travel across borders. Step 2 could involve some interstate travel. And the idea of steps 2 and 3, or stages 2 and 3, is that we would gradually increase travel distances and the number of businesses that would be open in time for the June school holidays. So that's the Prime Minister's intent. It wouldn't be until stage 3 that we'd be looking at potential trans-Tasman or Pacific travel between Australia and its neighbours. On Friday, unfortunately, the government have had to freeze the early access to super scheme because the ATO detected alleged identity fraud. And so that scheme has been frozen until such time as there's greater clarity on what's happening with that. The government is absolutely putting in place processes to measure and assess the impact of each step before the next one's implemented. So the reason for having this 3-stage approach is so that there's enough time between them to actually assess and see. Thank you very much, team. I can see everybody's put up the links to the 3-step roadmap. Thank you so much. So the Prime Minister has said that each restriction would be reviewed by National Cabinet 3 weeks after it was implemented. So they're going to be keeping a very close watch on unacceptable outbreaks before moving to the next step. So let me be really clear. It's not that we've cleared COVID by any stretch of the imagination. We've reduced it to a level that our hospitals can cope with an uptick in the level of infection, and this is what the government and governments in the National Cabinet will be monitoring. So, as employers, it's really important to remember that we are going to see an uptick in cases, and that means that there is, particularly for businesses that are public facing, that there is going to be an increased risk of your staff getting COVID while they're doing their job. And that is something that you are going to be responsible for if that happens. So we're going to be doing a couple of topics this week on that very thing, and how you can minimise the risk to your business at the same time while getting back to work and back to business. So the Prime Minister has described these reviews between each of the stages as not a formal review, more as a stock take as to where the framework is at, and looking at where all the states are at those particular times. The ultimate aspiration of being at stage 3 in July. That's the ultimate aspiration, but we don't know whether we'll get there. So just be mindful of that. Stage 2 would be gatherings of anywhere up to 20 people, so go from 10 to 20, with gyms, beauty salons, cinemas, galleries, amusement parks, caravan parks and camping grounds to reopen. And step 3 would see gatherings of up to 100, a physical return to workplaces, nightclubs, food courts and saunas, etc. open, with interstate travel permissible and potential international travel coming onto the table. So in terms of when those steps will be, when will step 1 be in effect in your state or territory? So from South Australia, it's from today. For Queensland, it will be from next Saturday, the 16th of May. Victoria, we're yet to hear from Premier Daniel Andrews. We're expecting to have more information about that today. Tasmania, some aspects will be released today, the rest next Monday, the 18th. Northern Territory, we haven't had a statement yet. New South Wales. The changes for New South Wales are that, and this is yesterday, Sunday, the New South Wales Premier announced a number of changes to the present restrictions to take effect this Friday, the 15th of May. And that will be that from Friday, this Friday, the 15th of May, there will be able to be outdoor gatherings of up to 10 people. Cafe and restaurants can open and 10 people be seated, provided that the 1.5 metre between people and 4 square metre rule between tables exists. Obviously, this isn't going to be easy for many cafes and restaurants. There was still a lot that are not greatly helped by the change, but they'll need as much community patronage within the rules as possible. So the idea is for us to go and support them as we have been with takeaway and delivery where that's been available. From this Friday, you'll be able to have up to 5 visitors, that is inclusive of children, to your household at any one time. So the members of your household plus 5 visitors, including children. Outdoor equipment can be used with caution and with continued adherence to social hygiene, social distancing and hand hygiene. Outdoor pools can open with restrictions. Weddings, you can have up to 10 guests. Funerals can be up to 20 mourners inside and up to 30 mourners if it's an outside funeral. And up to 10 worshippers at religious gatherings or places of worship. The present restrictions on regional travel, except where it's necessary travel, which is what the restrictions are that we have right now, will continue. And regional holidays. So restrictions around both of those things will remain in place for the present. So we don't have any change to that in New South Wales at this time. We'll wait for further information about that. So it begs the question, what the heck do we do now? Look, it's incredibly important, first and foremost, that you're communicating regularly and often with your staff about what's happening. So there'll be lots of talk coming out of the changes announced on Friday, the changes that our New South Wales Premier has announced yesterday. Lots of people will have questions. Am I coming back to work? If so, when? What do you do with staff you've stood down who've gone and found work elsewhere? You might be claiming JobKeeper for them already. So all of these are many and varied questions that you're likely to have. Talk to us, get advice, make sure that you know what the circumstances are, how they're going to affect your business, how your business is going to respond. Get advice for how to handle a staged return for work for stood down staff. That's whether you're JobKeeper eligible or not. Check out the work health and safety obligations that you have. Very, very important. There is industry-specific information and toolkits that are now available on the Safe Work Australia website. This website has been identified by National Cabinet as the central source of information and resources for health and safety for all businesses across the country during COVID. So I'm sure the link for that is going to go up in our chat screen shortly. But it's incredibly important for employers, for all of us to understand that we could be held liable for any of our staff who contract coronavirus on the job. As restrictions ease, workers prepare to return to offices, cafes, restaurants, retail, etc. We need to be really mindful as employers that we need to adhere to strict health guidelines, or we potentially face quite serious legal trouble. Because as these restrictions are easing, the number and the likelihood of infection will go up, and we have to be absolutely vigilant as employers. The fact that we're in a pandemic only raises the level of those obligations. It certainly doesn't give us any excuses. So we need to continue to provide a safe workplace. And if we ignore social distancing or hygiene guidelines, then we could be sued by staff members who suffer long-term impacts from being infected by COVID-19. It would be, in the current circumstances, almost impossible for an employer to try and make the defence that they had no idea about the guidelines. That would be nigh on impossible. The guidelines are readily accessible, and you should inform yourself and get advice about what your obligations are. We could be found to be negligent and held liable for damages, including failing to do things like providing hand sanitizer or ensuring social distancing measures are in place. And this past weekend, perhaps because it was Mother's Day yesterday, whether you're in a regional area or whether you're in a metro, the shopping centres were absolutely crammed, apparently, and people were not observing social distancing, and in some cases not observing appropriate hygiene either. And we all have a responsibility around this. And as employers, we have really serious obligations. So it's incredibly important that we are mindful. We also need to be really mindful for staff who might have pre-existing health conditions, because if they contracted the disease, they're not prevented from making a workers' compensation claim if they're not warned about the virus in the workplace. So you need to be communicating with your staff. You need to make it really clear to them what the risks are. If you've got staff who say, hell no, I'm not coming back, I think the risk is unacceptable, you need to get advice and talk to us. So it's really important that we know what our obligations are, that we know the guidelines really well, and that we adhere to them as we're trying to return to some kind of business as normal. So what are the practical realities? What the heck do we do now? First and foremost, get advice and plan. It is incredibly important that you have your planning hat on as an employer at the moment, and that you're absolutely meticulous about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, the communication of that to your staff, what you're putting in place to make sure that you're meeting all of your health and safety obligations. And what can you do and should you be doing lawfully in terms of documenting all of that consultation with your staff, and making sure that if you're changing the nature of anybody's employment, you're bringing them back off stand down, whatever you might be doing, all of that needs to be in writing, and you need to meet your employment law obligations. So please talk to us and get advice so that you don't misstep without not knowing what you didn't know. Because the law, whichever part of the law we're talking about, employment law or health and safety law, those lawful obligations you are expected to know and comply with as employers, and ignorance is not going to be a defence. So please talk to us. It's also going to be incredibly important, beyond getting advice and having a good, robust plan in place for return to work. And that will include health and safety, that will include all your employment law obligations, that will include minimising your risk, is to have good, robust employment contracts, position descriptions, and relevant policy in place. That will be not only incredibly important for your staff to have in front of them, and to know what's expected and your obligations, your entitlements, all of those things, and the policy that the company's putting in place around the pandemic, around health and safety, around customer service, around housekeeping, all of the things that become incredibly important, even more important than normal in this pandemic. You need to communicate frequently and regularly with your staff. We all know that in the absence of information, people create their own ideas. They get information from somewhere else. They will fill that vacuum of information with stuff that they believe to be true. It's incredibly important that you are the one that is the setting the information as the employer, whether it's through a support like ours, where we can do this with you and for you and with your staff, or whether you're going to do it yourself. But you need to make sure that you're communicating frequently and regularly with your staff, and be vigilant. Encourage all of your staff, both at a personal and a professional level, to be observing social distancing, hand hygiene, all of those things, which, as we start to move more readily through each other's homes and in the community and so forth, that we are super mindful of. Because, as I said, the risks are going to go up. It doesn't mean that COVID's gone away. It just means that there's more likelihood that you'll get an ICU bed if you need it. So I can't stress this highly enough. Really important time for you to be getting advice, understanding what your obligations are, talking to your staff, and having a plan, and making sure that everybody understands the plan. You can modify a plan once one's in place, but if you don't have one, it's going to be diabolical. So please get in touch with us if we can help you with that. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am just having a look in the chat screen. I haven't had any specific questions, but of course you've got all of our contact details there provided by my fantastic team for getting in touch with us if you've got specific questions about your business. Thank you so much for joining us. My sincere apologies that we had a false start this morning in terms of the live stream. I've now got Firefox downloaded, and so it looks like that will be a browser that will be liked from here on out. So thank you for joining us. If you've got specific questions about your business, or you want us to help you out, contact us anytime on the contact information provided. Tomorrow, being Tuesday, every Tuesday we have our delightful consultant psychologist Jessica providing us with some fantastic strategies to support mental health and well-being in the workplace, particularly in the current circumstances. Jess will actually be taking us through mindfulness strategies tomorrow for managing stress and anxiety. So I'm sure we're all going to benefit from tuning into that. So please join us. Invite your colleagues and friends to join us. We'd love to see you. In the meantime, please hug the people that you can. Wave cheerily at those that you'd love to, but you can't. Stay safe. Stay home unless you need to be out and about. Wash your hands, and we'll really look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us.